All right, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually looking at the hematocrit, which is the percentage of red blood cells that we have. So in order to do that, we actually have to centrifuge the blood, which is what this thing is over here. It's a centrifuge, it's a micro hematocrit centrifuge. So what we do is we actually have these 4 wells here. We're going to put 2 samples in here. We're going to spin it down. As it spins, it's going to separate the substances in the blood by weight. So your red blood cells will be on the bottom, your white blood cells and your plasmas will be in this layer called the buffy coat, which is between the red blood cells and then the top layer, which is the plasma. So I already have one done here because whenever we use a centrifuge, we have to balance the centrifuge. So I have one sample done, but I'm going to show you how we actually do this to prepare the blood to get it centrifuged. So here I have my little capillary tube, and then I have the whole blood sample. Once again, this is horse blood that we're looking at. So the way that we do this is we want to get the blood into the tube, and we want the tubes to be about equal in terms of how much blood is in them. So I plug one end, I put the other end in, and then I kind of turn it a little bit sideways. And as I release the plugged end, what's going to happen is by capillary action, the blood is going to enter into that little capillary tube. And so if I stop the process, you can see the blood's already filling up that tube. And so I want to get about as much blood in this tube as I do have in the other one, which is going to be a little bit of trial and error. So I'm going to have to stop and compare a couple of times. But once we fill the tube, I'll show you how we seal the tube. So that's about as much as there is in the other one. So I have this putty here that we seal the tube. So I'm still holding that other end just to make sure that the blood doesn't spill out. And all I'm going to do is just kind of punch into that putty, and that putty will seal the bottom of the tube there. So you can see that seal there. So once we have the blood, I'm going to wipe it down just a little bit because there's blood on the outside of it. Once we have the blood, we can then put it into the centrifuge. Once again, the centrifuge, what it is doing is it is going to be basically spinning the sample so quickly that the sample will separate based on its weight. So whatever is heaviest will end up on the bottom, which is the red blood cells, also known as the erythrocytes. Then the white blood cells and the platelets will then be the next layer, which is called a buffy coat. And then the next layer is going to be the plasma. So I have to let this run. It's pretty loud, but it runs for about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll pause the video, I'll show it and pause the video, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like at the end of the centrifuge. Okay, so now that the centrifuge has finished running, we can actually take out the samples. And when we look at the samples now, you'll notice that we have this clear layer. The top is kind of at the tip of my finger. And then we have this red layer, and in between there's a really, really fine layer that's kind of a whitish color, and that layer is the buffy coat. So the way to determine hematocrit is once we have this separation, we have to use this reader card. And the way that you set up the reader is you're going to put the base of the tube at the bottom line here, and then the top of basically the base of the red, and then the top of the plasma you're going to stick at the top. So once you have it lined up where the base and the top of the sample are on the baseline and the top, then you can actually read the sample. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking for the top of that red line, and the top that I'm seeing here looking at this sample is I'm seeing that the hematocrit is about 48. So if I'm reading this line right here, it's about 48. So that means that 48% of the blood sample is erythrocytes, and that is our hematocrit. And so our buffy layer is going to be less than 1%, and then that means that the remaining blood sample is going to be our plasma. So if we have a 48% red blood cell, that means that we have about 52% plasma. Well, 48 and 52 is 100, so what happened to the buffy coat, which is the white blood cells and the platelets? Well, that buff colored coat is basically, because it's less than 1%, we don't even really calculate it in our calculation. So it's less than 1% for the buffy coat. It's going to be the 48% for the erythrocytes, or the red blood cells, which is our hematocrit. And then when we have 48%, we know that the whole sample is 100%. So 100 minus 48 gives us that 52%, which is what the plasma is.